who knew 40 years ago that we'd be in this position where suddenly, here we are hosting this show, and the very guy that the show is all about comes to us and says, "I've been listening to you and I love your show." And we're kind of like,
Yep.
"No, but you're our idol. It's not, it's not the other way around."
Darin and Brent, welcome to the podcast. Great to finally have you on this podcast.
Yes, sir. Thank you for having us.
I've gone back to school. I've been reading. I've been doing a lot of reading.
I know. I asked you guys for some of your favorite books you want to read, the whole thing. So we're going to have some fun with this. But first, before we get into all of that, guys, tell us about yourselves, where you're from and your backgrounds and how you guys know each other. Give us the backstory.
Darin's always pointing at me. I don't know if he wants me to go first just because
You go first.
his resume is a lot bigger than mine. So, it's save the best for last. Save the best for last. Come on. Yeah, listen, I am a Van Halen fan of, we show our age when we say this, 40 years.
Wow.
Yeah, it was 1984 and we all know what happened that year.
Yep.
Van Halen has just been a part of the soundtrack of my life, and it's funny how all of us as fans are intertwined and we get the chance to connect and meet. And about 3 years ago, a mutual friend kind of hooked Darin and I up, and he's like, "I can't believe you two giant fans don't know each other." And there's a little story. We kind of figured out we did actually know each other. And hey, a year and a half ago, we started this crazy little thing called the Bogus Otis Show, all focused on Sammy and the 9 Degrees, and VH popping in all over the place. And, we've been having a blast doing it. And for me, I'm an avid reader. It's either two things. It's true crime or it's music biographies. And so I feel like I was born to be a guest on Booked on Rock. That's all I'm going to say.
Cool. Now, wait, which one of you guys did or helped to put together a video for Sammy? I'm trying to remember which one, you guys.
That's Darin. Yeah,
Okay,
see, his resume's bigger. I'm telling you.
Yeah, Darin.
Well, it's funny because Brent and I are still getting to know each other. And dude, I didn't know that you like true crime. Let's talk. Let's talk after this. I think we have another podcast idea.
Yeah, true crime podcast.
But so I came into the Van Halen fold a few years later. So I discovered Van Halen 87-ish, 86, 87, where someone gave me a mixtape of Sammy first. And then I discovered Van Halen with Roth. I'm like, who's the new guy? So I kind of came into it backwards. But love both eras of Van Halen. But when we were looking at something to start a podcast and talk Van Halen, there's already a bunch of obviously awesome Van Halen podcasts out there. So we're like, well, look, we're huge Sammy fans, and there's no Sammy cast, so let's do that.
I was surprised.
So that's how we started.
That there weren't any Sammy podcasts out there.
So were we.
I know of.
Yeah, shocking a little bit. But the beautiful thing, Eric, is now we get to say in the opening of our show that we are the world's only dedicated Sammy Hagar podcast. So we're, trying to put ourselves at the top of the heap there. But more importantly, the fun that we have had in meeting people, interviewing guests, and talking to other people that have a passion for the same music that we do. For me, that has absolutely topped anything else that has happened on this show. It's just been awesome to connect with people.
Yeah,
and I'm sure we can probably also say in common that, well, probably the three of us, that Van Halen News Desk was always there in the background almost my entire Van Halen fandom, right? So, I mean, I go back to the Van Halen mailing list days.
Yeah, I remember that.
Signing up through Pine and talking, dial up.
Yeah. Listen, I'm with you guys. Even though I worked for the Van Halen News Desk, I'm still a fan because I go back to the days of the Inside magazine. And that was like Christmas morning when that thing came.
Well, look, in a way, VHND kind of inspired our show, which was basically, let's just keep flagging, waving the flag for the greatest rock and roll band ever. Right?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Now, tell me about the name of the podcast. And I did ask you this, or I think you guys provided this information when we put an article up on Van Halen News Desk. But for those who aren't familiar with Bogus Otis, what does that mean? So the Bogus Otis Show, 9 Degrees of Sammy Hagar. So what's the meaning behind that? And what's also behind the 9 Degrees of Sammy, that part of the title?
Well, I guess it goes back to the very inception, right? Where we're thinking up names and we wanted something kind of inside baseball. And for those of us who are diehard Red Rocker fans, Bogus Otis is Sammy's crazy chicken on his arm. I guess. Is it a chicken?
Yeah, the
Although
road
Brent's
chicken, right?
farther than me, he has it now. I haven't got
road-
mine yet, so he's got his Bogus
The
Otis
road.
on his arm.
That's it. Yeah, I think I didn't even realize that the origin of that tattoo is as far reaching in history as it is. I think Sammy got that tattoo when he was like 17 years old or something like that. So we're talking, almost 6 decades this thing has been on his arm. And it's always been this little mysterious character that pops up here and there through the history of the band. And we were throwing names around as Darin said, and I tend to go to the very cliched well often, and I'm like, maybe we should name it after a song lyric or something. And he's like, I've been thinking, what do you think about Bogus Otis? And I was like, boom, brilliant, 100%.
No, it stands out.
That's got to be the name.
Absolutely.
It's got
Yeah.
a ring to it, right?
Yeah.
Originally it was Bogus Otis Podcast. We're like, that's too long. That isn't Bogus Otis Show.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
And
we
then
just went to
9
that right off
Degrees
the
of
bat.
Sammy Hagar. I'm assuming this is just because.
So that's
he knows
basically
everybody.
Sammy's love of nines, right? Of the
Yeah.
nine.
Yeah.
And really, it's an excuse for us to talk about everything ever connected to Van Halen.
Yeah. I was going to say, plus Sammy knows everybody too. It's
Yes,
like,
there you go.
there isn't anybody that he's not friends with. Yeah.
But also, we should gloss over it. We can't gloss over this part. Like, so Brent comes from the field of live entertainment and staging and putting on massive concerts. And he comes from that side of the entertainment world. And I come from the production of content and animation and music videos and things like that. So we kind of came at it from two angles. So we also both love Cabo, libations, especially of the Sammy kind, food. So really, we had a lot beside the music. We felt we had more than enough topics that we could kind of come at together, right? So that's where the 9 Degrees kind of fits in as well.
Yeah. Speaking of Cabo, how many times have you guys been there
Mhm.
to Sammy's club?
I don't know if I can count that high.
Really? Is that many times, huh?
I've been to Cabo, and this is the reason why I know this number. I have been to Cabo 15 times, and the reason why I know 15 is I have this little ritual, my wife and I. Every time we go to Cabo, I bring back a little bottle of sand from the beach in Cabo, usually Medano Beach. And just like in a little water bottle or something, or a little plastic bag, I bring home some sand as a little souvenir. And then what I've done is every time I empty a bottle of Cabo Wabo tequila, I've put the sand from a trip in the bottle. So I actually have them right here. I can show you. So I've got 15 bottles, empty bottles of Cabo Wabo tequila, and they all have sand in them from Cabo San Lucas, from the
Very
beach.
cool. Now, for those who are
cool.
listening to just audio, this episode is on our YouTube channel, so you can check it out.
Yeah.
Very
That's awesome.
cool. The
Yeah, so
that
15.
Cabo Wabo bottle is cool, man. It's just classy looking.
Yeah, all the logos are pretty awesome, eh? In their
Yeah.
own way, they're very cool. Yeah, so just a little bit of home away from home, the sand from
Nice.
Cabo. So yeah, 15 trips for me and counting.
Okay, is it 15 hangovers?
No. There's at least 3 hangovers in each trip. So
Nice.
yeah.
Yeah.
I've got to be
actually-
close to that, right? I got to be somewhere in there. But
Yeah, and the only other thing I wanted to mention was I have been very fortunate just by nothing other than truthfully, pure dumb luck. Twice, I've never been to Cabo during a birthday bash. Firstly, it's always
Okay.
been outside of the birthday bash,
I was wondering.
and very serendipitously, it just has happened twice. While we've been there, he's been in town, and I get messages from somebody like, "Hey, did you see on Facebook Sammy's in town?" Blah blah blah. And so twice I've actually purely by chance caught him at the club. Once he was doing a little acoustic set with Vic Johnson right when they were road testing
Awesome.
the acoustic album, the Light Roast album.
Which I love.
Yeah.
I
And
love
then
that.
the second time he had Trey Cool, the drummer of Green Day, was in town with him, and he showed up at the club with Trey Cool, and they jammed a whole set with the house band, and I was just like mind blown
That's
just to have that opportunity.
I
Yeah.
think it's now been 10 years since that album came out.
Yeah,
I think it was
it is.
2014.
wow.
Yeah. Yeah.
Crazy.
But we're
So-
still like 30.
Yeah,
right?
sure,
It's
of
amazing.
course. course.
That's crazy.
Darin, have you ever gone for Sammy's birthday? Have you ever seen Sammy perform there?
So I have. So I produced and conceived and directed the music video for Get It Up when he was in Chickenfoot. And when I presented it to his manager at the time, they were really happy with it. And for a little while there, I was invited to a couple bashes. In fact, I was also at the 20th anniversary in 2010, which was just a one night, not like a massive 6-night party extravaganza for his birthday. It was just like a one-off, one night, awesome party, but it was treated like a birthday bash. He had all kinds of guests there, and it's a ton of fun. I mean, I've been going there for many years before the bashes and after, where I couldn't get in, but it's always a blast to be there. Even if he's not there, you can just feel the aura. It's just fun to kind of be in the presence, of the man himself, right?
Yeah,
And unlike bringing back sand, I've been bringing back. The store is gone now, but it's across the street called the Faces of Mexico, right across from the cantina.
Wow,
So I
that's
collect
cool.
Day of the Dead art.
Sweet.
So every time I go back, I bring back some sort of Day of the Dead, something or other.
Yeah.
Right?
And there was that one point there where that was just a deserted island almost. I mean, nobody was there. Sammy and the guys in Van Halen took over, and now it's a huge. It's like a vacation destination for so many people now.
Yeah, it's incredible. Every year that we've gone back, if I think about the last 5 or 6 years, minus about 18 months in COVID, where no one could go anywhere. If I think about my last probably 5 or 6 trips there, every time you go, you're driving from the airport to your hotel, and it's like, oh, there's another shopping mall, there's another resort, there's another something. Like, it's just been building up and up and up, and that corridor from San Jose del Cabo, where the airport is, down to Cabo San Lucas is just it's booming. There's condos, there's homes, there's resorts. Like, the growth in the last half dozen years it's mind blowing. It's crazy. Yeah.
You've had some great guests on the podcast. You had Sammy's sister. You've had guys that work with Sammy. Tell us about some of the guests that you've had that people can check out if they haven't listened to the podcast yet. It's available everywhere.
Well, we got to start with you, man. You were our first doubleheader.
That's right. I was,
Two-time guest.
Yeah. Yeah.
There you go.
Our recent one was for Balance.
Yeah.
For Balance. Yeah. Yeah. But Sammy's sister, how about that, man?
Yeah, we've had some fun times chatting with people, and sometimes ones that have caught us a bit off guard, and ones that have really been surprising, telling some interesting stories. Velma was amazing. We reached out to her cold. She had no idea who we were from anybody, and she responded back. She was very gracious. I think she probably took a few days or a week to maybe think about it. I'm sure she probably made some calls and was like,
right.
Is this okay? But she came on and she told us some incredible stories about their childhood. She was very open and honest. She's a great lady, and she was a lot of fun. We had a blast chatting with her. We're gonna have her on again.
Yep.
Yeah.
Good.
Mike Frazier was a ton of fun, right? He was really cool.
Yeah,
Mike Frazier is
he's a mixer and producer, Canadian guy, actually, in Vancouver on the West Coast, and he had a hand in mixing, recording, producing Balance, both Chickenfoot records. He's actually worked with Sammy quite a bit. So we got some interesting insight from him into the whole world of engineering, mixing, mastering, the recording process, which was cool. We spoke with Jorge, Sammy's partner in Cabo Wabo Cantina. We've had former bandmate Jesse Harms on, who was part of the Wabos.
Bro, yeah, we had Bro.
We had Dave Lauser on, who's a Wabos member, and I think one of Sammy's oldest friends. Darin did this crazy deep dive research, and he comes to me and he's like, "We're gonna get this guy called Daniel Kleinman on the show," and I was like, "Who the hell is Daniel Kleinman?" We start doing a bit of research, and it turns out, Darin's a big James Bond fan, and so Daniel Kleinman has done a lot of, I guess, the opening.
He's done all the opening
of the Bond movies, right?
Since GoldenEye. Yeah. Actually, since License to Kill. He started on License to Kill, and he's pretty much inherited the baton from Maurice Binder, who did all the iconic ones. But his are incredible. They're almost like mini music videos. And it's funny, if I had reached out to him asking to talk about Bond, he probably would never have said yes, because he's a pretty big guy. Like Oscar winner, for his visuals.
How'd
He
you
probably
get
would
him
have said no, but since we asked to talk about Live Without a Net, which he directed,
Yes.
bam, he
Yeah.
came on. It was
That's
it was a lot of fun, right?
Yeah,
that's a
incredible
brilliant
chat
song.
with him. He talked about, I mean, you got to remember, Live Without a Net was 51, 52 or 1986. So you think about the technology that was available that time for recording video and audio. And I think he said they had, I think it was 12 cameras that were set up around the venue, and they had to keep changing the reels of tape. And so he had to uh, catalog them basically and name them and put them in order, and then after the fact go back and stitch it all together. So when you see, there's a couple of clips in Live Without a Net where you see a red clock that's somewhere up,
The
and those,
digital clock.
yes,
Yeah.
those were actually time clocks that they used as vantage points, so they knew where they had to change reels and stitch
Oh,
things
wow.
together. It's
Yeah,
just,
for editing, right?
yeah, it
Yes,
was so
yes.
fascinating listening to him.
Well,
Amazing.
that show is 45 minutes from where I live. I mean, I went to college in New Haven.
Yeah.
And in fact, Steve Roth, the host of the DLR cast, co-host with Darin Paltrowitz, went to school in New Haven. And I remember in high school, this is before I became a huge Van Halen fan. Right around the time when I did, around 1988 or so, I had guys in my class that said they were there, and they'd say, if you pause at such and such spot of the video, you'll see me in there. You'll see me. I'm waving or whatever. The New Haven Coliseum, which is not there anymore, and that's such a great video. I wish the whole show
Yeah.
was in there, and
And we asked him about that. We
Yeah.
asked him.
yeah. What
Said
was
he's
his
probably
answer?
got it somewhere. He's got to
He's
dig
got it.
through it, but he's like, I have it somewhere, right?
Yeah, man, that's cool.
Yeah.
Okay, you also had another guest, the guy, what was his name? Sammy something. Sammy Hagar.
Yeah, he ambushed us,
Oh,
right? That guy ambushed
him.
us. He
Him.
didn't really ask
Yeah.
us.
So tell us about this whole thing, because you did not see this coming. This wasn't expected by you, I don't think.
It was
No.
hoped for,
Yeah.
but we were there to interview the brewmaster for Red Rocker Lager and his son, right? And we were told that Sammy would be obviously in the house because it was also a gig at the Fillmore Detroit. So, but we were told that Sammy's gonna come down. We were situated at the side of this bar. We found a cool spot to kind of set up. And when we were told he's gonna come down, he's gonna serve drinks to his colleagues and friends at this kind of VIP party. So we were told just to kind of do our thing. And then when he comes over, we probably want to move or pick up all of our stuff and move to the bar because he's going to be serving drinks. Well, he didn't. He came around the bar, went right past all those people, and pretty much crashed the show. And he's like, "What are you
Right
guys
up
up
behind
to?"
you.
Using my tattoo, and we thought he was going to give us trouble, but then he's like, "No, you're good. You're good. I checked you guys out, man. You're good."
Yeah.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
So-
It's funny that the chat with him, I mean, it was brief, and certainly unplanned. And as Darin says, unexpected, but hoped. And a really cool moment for me was he kind of gave us this like, oh, how the hell did you guys get in here sort of reaction. And he plunked himself down, and literally, Eric, I'm not kidding you, the first words out of his mouth is, he actually said, he's like, I'm really glad you guys are here because I've been wanting to tell you for a long time. I really love what you're doing. And I just went,
Oh man.
like, I can die now.
Yeah, that's it. Take care.
Right?
We're
And
we're
he
all
did
set.
say, he asked us, he's like, who's your favorite guest you've had on the show? And we said Velma, and he was like, oh, fuck
Oh
it.
man,
He told us a couple of Velma stories, and then he again, as we were wrapping up, he's like, again, I gotta say, when I first heard of you guys, I was kind of, someone put you on my radar, and I was like, can we use foul language on the show, Eric?
Absolutely,
Is that
of
okay?
course, by all
Okay.
means.
He was like, he's like, who the fuck are these guys? Using my name and using my this, and he's like, then I checked them out, and I was like, oh, these guys are cool, they're great, blah
That's
blah blah.
great.
And it just, for us, I think it's, it obviously was hoped at some point in time we would have the opportunity to chat with him. The fact that it happened in person was a bonus, but for us, I think it just kind of validated that what we're doing is, it's important to fans and listeners, and it's important to us. And I think we realize that, hey, this is kind of fun, and it's a really cool opportunity. And I just, who knew 40 years ago that we'd be in this position where suddenly, here we are hosting this show, and the very guy that the show is all about comes to us and says, "I've been listening to you and I love your show." And we're kind of like,
Yep.
"No, but you're our idol. It's not, it's not the other way around, right?"
That was
There's,
pretty
Very
cool.
cool.
there's
Super
one more
cool.
podcast that doesn't exist that needs to be made. A Michael Anthony podcast.
Yeah,
We need a
yeah.
Mikey podcast.
Yeah,
All
we
about
do.
Mikey.
We do. We do.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Or
we do.
entire season of the Bogus Otis Show could be just to Mikey.
100%.
Right?
It absolutely could. And the last thing I want to say about this truthfully, because I don't come at this honestly with any ego. Anyone who knows me, I'm a very egoless person. I actually feel like truthfully blessed and like humbled that we've been able to do it and that we had the chance to talk to him. And I can tell you, everyone who is a fan of Sammy who hasn't had the opportunity to meet him, I can tell you unequivocally, he is everything that you think he is. He
That's what I wanted to
truly,
ask. Yeah.
he gives a shit about his fans. It's not fake. It's not put on. It's not an act. Sometimes when you meet someone who is an idol and you're like, oh, that guy was an asshole. That's a real letdown. Sammy, I can tell you, he was gracious. He was kind. He was easy to talk to. He's everything that he portrays himself to his fans. He truly is. And for me, I'm just like, that's all I need to know. It's awesome.
Yeah. Well, that's that saying, never meet your hero because you never
Yeah.
know.
Unless he's Sammy, right?
Yeah.
Well, Eric, you kind of touched upon it, right? It was like we were shocked that there wasn't some sort of Sammy centric podcast already out there. So really the whole genesis was like, well, like let's do that because he deserves the legacy and credit that he's earned, and let's just talk about it. And we don't claim to know everything. There's stuff that many other fans know way more than we do.
Well,
Collectively, we know a ton, but I mean, we just like talking about it and meeting other people to talk about it as well, right? We're not just
a
Sammy
chance to
fans. We
learn
love
more
Van
about
Halen,
him.
right?
It's a chance to learn more about him through the guests.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's been the other sort of fun side piece of this. We talked off the top about, how you end up connecting with other people who have a like interest and, develop some connections. That's been a really cool part, specifically with listeners. We get messages on Facebook and Instagram, people reaching out saying, "Hey, I discovered the show," or "Hey, I've been listening since, blah 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 episode. It's really cool. It's interesting. I love it." But also, they will make comments about some of the episodes and say to us, like, "You guys were talking about such and such a thing," and they're actually filling in blanks that we had, giving us more details and information. And so it becomes an education for us. And so we start this cool dialogue. And I just, the Hammy Sagar barbecue guys down in Memphis, a great example. We reached out to them cold on Instagram and we're like, you guys are clearly fans. It's super unique what you're doing with the barbecue team. Let's get you on. They came on as an episode, had a great chat, but more importantly, we've become like friends over distance, and we're chat back and forth
Yeah,
all
that's
the
what
time
I found.
now.
Made so many great
Yeah.
friends through podcasting now, through
Yeah.
all the guys, you guys, and the podcast will rock, and I mean, you name it. I mean, so many authors now that I would say I'm friends with now just through the podcast, and we know Sammy's had an amazing career. We're talking 50 years. I mean, we're going back to early 70s when all this started. So this is one of those what if questions. He started with Montrose, then he goes solo. The self-titled debut for Montrose is a classic, of course, but he goes solo in '76. 9 out of 10 Scale was the first solo album. Then he hits his peak commercially in early '80s, mid '80s. Standing Hampton, Three Lock Box, VOA, which has I Can't Drive 55. Then comes Van Halen in 1985. But we later find out that he was considered at one point to possibly be the singer of Van Halen. There was that talk that Ted Templeman and Warner Brothers were saying, well, it's a little tough with Dave's voice. Maybe Ted obviously knew Sammy through the Montrose album because he produced it. Here's the big what if. What if that happened? What if it was the reverse? How would things have panned out for Sammy and Van Halen if he was in the band then? Because I have my thoughts on this.
Ooh, that's a juicy one.
Yeah. Because I feel like
Who's-
he joined Van Halen at the right time.
I think so
Like,
too.
I
I'll
think
just go
that's-
first because mine's short. Okay.
Yeah.
I don't think keyboards worked out for Roth, so I'm glad he kind of did his tenure when he did, because I think the Eddie's songwriting and aggression and tone kind of fit that vibe, and I'm happy when Sammy joined when he did. Be honest.
Yeah. Like, would they have written the type of songs that would have been as big as the ones that he wrote when Eddie's now in his 30s and looking to do something different? You know, and obviously, you know, we got to give props to Dave. You know, David Lee was the guy who he introduced the band to a wider audience, I think, just because of his outrageous personality. So, yeah,
Yeah,
it's one of those what ifs. What do you think, Brent?
yeah, I tend to agree with both of what you guys are saying. I think the timing was right. I don't know if it would have been the same had he, been in there at the beginning. And props to Roth, as you say, right? I mean, he made that band more than a band. They were larger than life, right? There's absolutely no question. That's undeniable, the success that they had with him. The music, obviously, but beyond the music, they were truthfully larger than life. I think Sammy came in at the right time because he was able to take this larger than life machine and just hone the musicality of it even more. Him coming in with uh, look, there's no question, a broader vocal range, guitar playing chops, some more experience as a songwriter. And so I think he helped to make the band mature and grow up a little bit. And it just sort of seemed like the natural evolution. If he was in there as a 22-year-old with all of them in 1978, I don't know if it would have been the same vibe.
Yeah, because I think Sammy became a better songwriter with each successive album as a solo artist, and
Yeah.
you hear it more and more with each album.
Yeah.
So
And I
by
think
the time
vocally, Sammy hit his golden throat stretch, in the Geffen eras onwards, right? So by 84, when he was hitting what I consider his peak vocals, for him to depart Van Halen at that point, if we're going to reverse roles here, I think would have been,
yeah.
yeah, it wouldn't, he was just coming into his 5150 voice in 84, right?
Yeah.
Talk about his voice. Among the best, where do you rank him? I mean, his voice is amazing. It still is. But you think about what he did on a song like Dreams. But not just that, not just the range and how many notes he can hit. It's like when you hear him singing, you know it's him. It stands out. It's not sterile. It's not, by the book. It's his own. He's got like almost like the Rod Stewart type of thing with the like there's what was somebody said
Just
recently,
enough,
there's
yeah, just
there's
enough
broken
wilt on the
glass in
rose.
his throat.
Yeah. Just
somebody
enough
was-
wilt on the rose.
Yeah.
That's it's a great way of putting
Yeah.
it.
I mean, where
No,
do you put him up among the greats?
Look, I think at 76 years old, he's proven he can still sing in a live setting. Um, he was never a screamer. He can hit the high notes, and he still can in some of those songs. But for me, it's always been kind of he's got this perfect blend of a melodic sounding voice, but the power is also there.
Power. It's like
And
just
it's
effortlessly hitting
yeah.
those notes.
Yeah, and for me, it's longevity to be able to, is he singing at the same level as he was 30 years ago? Of course not. Who is? Nobody. But I think the fact that he's still singing the style that he is, and he can still sing a lot of those songs from 30 years ago with the power that he is, in his mid 70s it's near impossible to find. We were just talking the other day about the new Judas Priest album. So,
I heard the first single, I think.
sounds great.
I haven't heard it at all. I just heard
It's pretty
Yeah.
good, man.
Yeah.
the guys on three sides of the coin, the Kiss podcast. One of the guys on there said it's just phenomenal. I haven't heard
It is, man. It's pretty awesome. There's some
Yep.
5150 drums in there too. Some Simmons drums are kind of make a guest appearance. I mean, we talk about this all the time, obviously. In my money, I think the only other person I guess they're kind of retired now. In my mind, who could stand against Sammy musicality, vocal wise, would be David Coverdale. And I'll probably get a lot of people upset. But also, David Coverdale doesn't play guitar like Sammy, you know?
Right.
So Sammy has this whole other side that most people forget. It's this, he can tangle with some of the greatest guitarists that ever have happened. I can't see Robert Plant picking up a fiddle and jamming with Eddie Van Halen. Obviously we're biased, but I put Sammy probably at the top there, right? Although the Judas Priest is pretty good.
No, it was. Halford can still sing. I agree with you.
But he doesn't play guitar.
No. And we've also even thrown like a Paul Rogers in the
Oh,
conversation
yes.
sometimes.
Yes.
Right?
And Sammy's such a huge fan. Remember you talked to Sammy on Sammy's road trip show? He had Paul Rogers. He was like in awe of Paul. Like, I can't believe I'm interviewing you. Like he was a fan more so than a fellow singer, fellow veteran.
But Sammy's also soulful too, right? Like,
yes.
I would probably at some point, I mean, Lou Gramm is past his, he's nowhere near where
great voice, though. Yeah.
He's awesome. He has some health issues. We might even get into it because his book is great. But, he's got that soulful side to him that Sammy has as well, right? So Sammy can belt out the rockers, the meat and potato rockers. He can also get pretty soulful. He's even, he's done some like country-esque songs, right? And folk rock, Americana. So he's kind of got a massive range too that you could compare against. I don't know. Has Coverdale done anything that's kind of country-esque?
No,
I don't know, man.
No, it's funny that you say, what I was thinking of when you said soulful. This is going to sound crazy, but let's take a deep cut off of VOA, a song like Dick in the Dirt. Sammy can sing Dick in the Dirt and make his voice is still soulful. Like it's as crazy as it sounds, right? It's true.
There's a great story. I'll never forget this. I was in junior high, 7th grade, and one of the kids in my class had the cassette VOA, and he was just so proud. Like he was so tough, like I got check out this song, Dick in the Dirt. He's like a tough guy,
And even let's look at an album like I Never Said Goodbye that happens, on the heels of 5150. That record is one of those ones we have talked about that record quite a bit actually in recent episodes, top to bottom. You can listen to that entire album, and that's another one for me that just his vocal range, the power in his voice, and the songs it's inspirational stuff. It's just
Eagles Fly. I think this is the best song he's ever written as a solo artist.
Yeah,
I think.
Yeah.
And he had that huge run with VH, the 5150 album, 86, and then you have Oh You It Went 2, For Unlawful Carnal Knowledge, Balance, and then he's out of the band in 96. Were you as shocked as I was when you heard that he was out of the band? Because I just thought those guys were so tight. I mean, what was your...
We talk about this all the time, man, because Kings was like, oh, we're getting another glimpse of like they're going even heavier and darker. Wow, this is great. And then boom,
shocked.
Over. Yeah.
I think my favorite story to kind of put this into some context, another great guest that we had not that long ago, handful of episodes ago or so, was Bob Dates, who was their road manager for Van Halen for probably 10 years. And it was interesting. We kind of grilled Bob a little bit about the Balance tour, sort of saying like what was going on behind the scenes, because clearly there was a divide at the time. No one really knew, because you look at the production, the live show, the Balance tour, the Toronto pay-per-view, like they were killing it on stage. They sounded great. The tour was huge. All of this stuff, but and now we know now that things were crumbling behind the scenes. And we asked Bob, like, were there signs? What was, and he said, here's the thing. It didn't matter what was happening off stage. These guys, his words were, these guys are professionals. And so when they stepped on that stage, they gave everything for the audience in that show. It didn't matter if they had, had a big fisticuffs fight 10 minutes before they went on stage. They're pros, and they're there to do a show, and they brought it, and you would never have known that was going on.
At that time, it was the grunge era around there, and you just figured that was just, and they're older, you just figured that was just, they're a little different as far as the way they are on stage, or not. It's not like the Live Without a Net. It's like they're just, I love it. They're like just high school dudes hanging out and partying together, you know. But they were a little older, so I just thought of it that way. I didn't think there was any tension between anybody. They were
Yeah.
just not as buddy, you know, as they were in '86.
I did question the back of the record. We barely see Sammy. I thought that was strange at the time.
Yeah,
I mean, I had no clue what was happened a month or a year or so later, but I thought that was very weird. Right? Here's the guy who's been front and center, and you can barely see it's him. So I thought that was kind of weird at the time.
well, here's the other big what if. What if Sammy stayed in the band? I mean, would that lineup have continued with #1 albums and big tours? Do you think their sound would have changed with the times? Because there were few bands that were able to stretch that out into the early 2000s. Aerosmith, I remember Jaded was a big hit single in the early 2000s, and then things started to fade off commercially. So would they have still been one of those juggernauts, you know, and one of those few bands that could just survive and keep cranking out #1 albums?
Yeah, I think yes, and probably one of my biggest regrets or disappointments as a fan over the years is that they let gaps in time happen when they could have been producing and doing things. And you know, even just seeing how the sound had evolved with a song like Humans Being, and you know, again, there was a ton of friction at that time. But I mean, what a powerful song, what
One
a
of my all-time
shift
favorite
a little
Sammy
bit.
era songs.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, if you had have had an entire album of that following up on Balance, for me, I think the fan base was as big still and as loyal that they could have, despite the shifting landscape of music, they could have continued as a hard rock band and probably done 3 more albums and been successful. I really think so.
Yeah, what could have been?
Yeah.
Yep. I think if they'd gotten through, if he had stayed, I feel like Van Halen 3, as it is, as we know it today, was kind of like a demo. And that's not a slam on Gary, and I don't mind Van Halen 3, to be honest.
No,
But I
I'm
mean,
with you. Yeah,
I feel like that was a demo, and maybe if Sammy had shaped it, we would have seen the or heard the the V2 of it, with Sammy kind of shaping some things with the melodies and stuff that we know Sammy brings. That could have got them through. And maybe today they would be as revered as. This is going to kill me to say. I don't mean this as a slight either against Bon Jovi fans, but I feel like they would be revered as a Bon Jovi now. They would have kind of gotten through and kind of been secured a place at the top. And we'd see these young kids walking around today with more Van Halen shirts than we
Right.
see Def Leppard shirts. And it's not a slam against Def Leppard either. I'm just saying there's some of these bands I feel that because of the path that Van Halen took and the inactive years, as Brent mentioned, it took a bit of a hit
I know.
on
Ticks
them.
me
But I'm so
off.
happy
I
that
hate
Sammy
it.
kept the flag going
Yes.
outside of it. He kept the sound with his voice going on the side. So
Well,
Yeah.
we remember a time when pretty much everybody around you knew who Van Halen was, either knew who they were or was a huge fan. And now it bums me out because I talk to people who are younger, and they they don't give a shit. or I mean they don't even really know about
They
him
don't
that much. I
know.
mean, you know, and
No.
that's just like
that's the worst part. They
'cause
don't
were
know.
everywhere for years, just year after year. They were everywhere on MTV, on the radio. They would whatever interviews on television, covers of magazines. It was like a given. It was like following a team that won the Super Bowl every year, and then all of a sudden the bottom drops out, and it's kind of like the New England Patriots. Like right now, it's like there are people now of a certain age that they won't remember what it was like to go see the New England Patriots, Tom Brady every year winning all the time.
Yeah.
And that's what it feels like, and it's a bummer. It's
Yeah.
Especially when bands like Judas Priest,
yes.
who were
Yeah.
there before Van Halen emerged, and they're now still releasing albums after. I feel that also hurts the Van Halen legacy a bit because these bands, 100 years from now or 500 years from now, when we look back, some of those bands I feel should not be as rated legacy wise or remembered as much. Maybe we'll place higher on that list, which really bothers me to say.
Yeah, I think with the Van Halen 3 thing, I think there's a lot of props that have to be given to Gary Sharon. I mean, the guy, Darin and I were talking about this just I think yesterday or the day before. He stepped into an impossible situation. There's no way that he could have truly been successful in the spot that he was put in. And I think if you really drill down, the fact of the matter probably is I don't know how much creative license or freedom he had in the recording and the making of Van Halen 3. It might have been, okay, Gary, you're going to write some lyrics, but this is what you're going to sing, kind of a thing. Whereas to Darin's point, with a more seasoned guy like Sammy, been around longer, been in the band longer, all of this, if you take what became the Van Halen 3 record, could you imagine if Sammy had have pushed the envelope a little and tweaked this and changed that and inserted his will a little bit more here and there? Um, that could have been a really interesting sounding record with him at the microphone. And again, that's still all respects to Gary, because I mean, I think he did a great job stepping into
Yeah.
literally an impossible situation.
Well, yeah, and then
right?
now it's become like the thing to just trash it.
Yeah.
To just say that nothing's good on there is just not true. Without You is a good song.
No. Yeah,
Um,
it's a solid album.
Year to the
Yep.
Day is cool. They're very long songs. They weren't really made for the radio. They were more of Eddie's progressive rock roots, the long extended songs, and it's just something he wanted to do. He did it. It didn't work, but kind of that affected him. I mean, it was a long time before he recovered from that.
Yeah.
Yeah, who's to say if Sammy had stayed and Van Halen 3 came out as a different version of what we know it is today? I mean, who knows? Maybe Eddie would have gone on a different course throughout the
Yeah.
2000s, right? Who knows?
Yeah. Well, another thing is that Sammy's book in 2012, read My Uncensored Life in Rock, a lot covered in that book, but of course it's the chapters on Van Halen that got a lot of the headlines, and a lot of it is from the reunion tour in 2004. And there's things in the book about Ed's drinking, and he lived like a vampire in his house, et cetera, et cetera. So do you think he should have included that in the book? In retrospect, was it worth it? Do you think he regrets it? I mean, did it bum you out, I guess, first when you read it? You say, that because it goes
Yeah.
against everything that, again, we just thought they were buds and everything was cool.
Yeah, I think I mean, there's been times in many interviews where he has conceded some regret in sharing some of the stories and saying some of the things that he did. However, I don't fault him. I don't blame him for it, because I think, he was talking authentically and it was a lived experience. I mean, by all accounts, that 2004 reunion tour was kind of a disastrous experience
Yeah.
for Sammy, right? And unfairly to him. So, you know, uh, I'm sure he probably looks back and thinks maybe I shouldn't have said some of the things that I did, but it is what it is.
It's a tell-all book. I guess you got to tell
Yep.
all. I mean, the publishers, I'm sure, were saying, look, we got to get something in here that, I don't know. I don't know. Were they looking for stuff like that to sell copies, or was it just? I think Sammy was the one who made all the final. There was a different draft. Right? There's a whole another book that he wrote. I have it somewhere.
Interesting.
It was from
Yeah,
like a few years before, and it never.
that's right.
It
Yeah,
never.
I think there was maybe 3 or so chapters that were actually leaked
Yeah,
on
I read
on
those.
the
I've read those.
internet.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, the
I mean, look,
publisher blocked him, or he tried to block the publisher from putting it out or something.
it
Yeah.
can't be any worse than what Ross been saying lately. We have
No.
to drag on the DLR boys on here, but
Yeah. Right.
I mean, to me, and maybe I'm speaking for all of us, but like we like to see our Van Halen with smiles. So whenever you read anything that's derogatory about them, it kind of bums me out, right?
Yeah.
But that's what happened. I mean, maybe it's not exactly verbatim, but I think we could all saw that I thought he was going to die in the 2000s. I was
Yeah.
waiting any moment to pick up a newspaper, and newspaper's that thing with the paper has words on it.
Yeah.
Sometimes they used to sell.
Yeah.
I thought I was gonna wake up and find that he died. So
Same
I
here.
mean,
Yeah. Yeah. That
Yeah,
was. It's still hard to believe that even happened. Just to see pictures of him, and it's just not. It wasn't him. That's not him. That's not the
I'm
guy.
so happy he didn't die that way. I'm so happy he came back. We
It's a
we
great
got
ending.
that healthier,
Yeah.
oh,
smiling Ed for a while, right?
Yeah.
absolutely. There was I saw 3 shows on the 2004 reunion tour. 2 of them I had that 5-star package thing that they sold, so you got to go and see soundcheck and do a little, tour backstage, the whole thing. And the soundcheck was, it was hard to watch. I mean, we all see videos of the tour of during the show, but there were a couple of moments in the sound check pieces that I was super fortunate to see. Like, what a unique experience! But it was hard to watch because he was there was it was not good.
It's
There
like it
was
wasn't even him. It's like,
no,
who is this imposter?
yeah,
Because the Eddie that everybody knows personally, up close, but also the Eddie that we know as fans, he just seemed like such a sweetheart of a guy, gentle soul, smiling, humble. People coming up to him, tell him he's the greatest thing ever, and he'd be like, I'm just a punk kid who plays guitar, right? And it just was like, is this really him? Is this like somebody else that is
yeah,
taking his place? But again, thank God he turned it around, and I wish he was still here. But the way he was able to pull, I always say if there is a movie on Ed, it's got a great ending to it. At least you have him, he sounded amazing by the
yeah,
end.
yeah.
Yeah. Do you think that that's why Alex isn't talking to Sammy?
Um,
More to it than
Here we go. Here we go.
yeah,
hey,
I think there's a bit more to it. I think you read with great frequency. Sammy has said in interviews like I call Al and I leave him a voicemail, or I send him a text and he doesn't reply, and that sort of thing. I think probably Alex is just, it probably started stemming from what was written in the book, but I think he just is probably just not interested. He just moved on to a
right.
different part of his life,
Yeah,
right?
because I mean, Mick and Keith said some stuff about Mick in his book that hurt Mick, and they just moved on. So that's why I would say maybe it's more than just the book. Maybe Alex would say, whatever. Yeah, I mean, it pissed me off that he wrote that stuff in the book, but it's not just that. You don't know. We don't
Yeah.
know, but maybe we will find out because Alex's book is coming out. It's titled
And he said he's
Brothers.
going to set the record straight, right? And
Right.
when I read that, I'm like, oh, that's to Sammy.
So
That's how
let's
I
get
took
to it.
that
Yeah.
comment.
Yeah. What do you think he's going to talk about in this book? What do you think? What do you hope he covers? Will he get into this early Sammy years? Will he get into the reunion tour in '04? What are your thoughts on the book?
I just hope it's not more things to make me sadder as a Van Halen fan. But
Judging by the
I would love
title,
to
I
hear
think
his side of it,
it might be
right?
a feel good story more than anything else.
Yeah,
Judging by the
maybe.
title, it might be something of
Yeah,
maybe a little bit of a tearjerker at the end because we
yeah,
know how things ended.
yeah. Because I mean,
So
he had a motorcycle accident. I mean, people kind of forget that part. Like that's what kind of found the tumor, right? I guess from what I remember.
right.
So there's a whole stretch there, like after 2015, 16, 17, that what was happening. I'd love to hear more what was really happening in there before he really found out that he had cancer, right? So, like, what were they
Yeah.
planning? What were they going to do? Maybe we'll find out some of those things, right? Some good
Yeah.
things.
I think that's interesting that you hit on that, Darren. For me, I mean, there's been some amazing books written about the early history of the band, obviously, like Greg Renoff's and Kevin Dodd's, and on and on and on. There's been some really excellent books. Obviously, Steve Rosen's Tone Chaser, right? Talking about all those early years. For me, I would be very interested to know what happened exactly as you said from kind of the end of the 2015 tour, where he looked so good and so healthy and his playing was incredible and he seemed to be having a great time. Those years, kind of 2015 to 2020, what was really going on? And I think you're right. It probably, if we hear some of that, it's going to be heartbreaking. There's no question. But very curious to hear what was going on in that time, and even the talk about that whole kitchen sink concept. Let's get Dave and Sammy, and we're going to do one last big mega tour. Like, it just, if there was ever one woulda, coulda, shoulda been for a Van Halen fan, man, it would have been that
Oh
tour
man.
for sure.
Yeah.
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 I think whatever's in the book is the reason he's not on the tour right now.
Mm.
So that's my fear. It's like there's
Yeah.
something big foot, the other shoe's going to drop, uh, which is why you won't see him on the tour. I mean, I hope that we do see him, but, I mean, him joining in a larger way, especially because it is in a way for his brother, unless he doesn't see it that way.
It's just gonna
Yeah.
be wild if he goes out there and does even one interview on TV. It'd be like, oh my God, there he is. We haven't seen him. He hasn't talked since Eddie passed. It'd be just
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
what's he been up to? Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I think either way very interesting, and I think it'll be a fascinating story. I mean, the bond that the two of them had, even as fans, casual observers, people that don't know either of them. I think it'll be very interesting to get the dynamic of that brotherly bond between the two of them, because they were, literally joined at the hip from the moment they got off the boat
Yeah,
in
isn't
the
that
US
crazy? Yeah,
until
man. What a
until he
story.
died, right?
What a
I'd love to
story.
hear Al's thoughts on the Van Halen 3 era. What he thought.
Yeah,
I'd love to hear what he thinks on that album and
yeah,
how it
Yeah.
went down and how it came together.
He was going through a divorce at that time, if I recall correctly.
yep, yeah.
Yeah.
I think you're right. Yeah,
Yep.
yeah. It'll be interesting, and I mean, I just think it's great that he's breaking that silence. He was never one to say a lot, and always sort of tended to be in the background, and didn't talk unless there was something to say, so to speak. So I think it'll be really interesting to finally hear from him.
Yep. Our guests are Darin Bristow, Brent Kinnaird, hosts of the podcast devoted to Sammy Hagar called The Bogus Otis Show, 9 Degrees of Sammy Hagar. Let's get to the books that you guys have read that you really enjoyed. Darin, you're a huge reader, especially rock bios. You love pretty much every Van Halen related book out there, so that goes without saying. But let's get to some of the others. I mentioned the Keith Richards book. That's one that's on your list. Life from 2010. And that's
Awesome
a
book.
close race between that and Red for the best book you've ever read.
On rock, I would say.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's because it's pretty well. If anyone sees it, it's you don't need a coffee table. It is the coffee table. It's so damn thick, right? There's a lot of juicy information, and he trashes Mick in there or makes fun of Mick sometimes. There's some juicy stuff. There's some controversial things, but it's also just fun. It's like listening to a pirate tell an old pirate treasure tale, right? You can hear Keith's whiskey stained voice telling you the story the way it's written, right? Which I thought was a great book.
What do you call
But
Mick the
second to
Laugh?
that, I would say here's these. I'm holding these up so listeners at home can't see them, but
Oh, okay. Yeah. Lou Graham,
these
Jukebox
are two of
Hero.
my other two favorite books.
Okay. So he's holding up Lou Graham, Jukebox Hero, and the other one is
It's
Joey
well,
Kramer.
there you go. It's another drummer
Hit
book.
Hard.
It's Joey
Yeah.
Kramer,
From Aerosmith.
Hit Hard from Aerosmith, which is actually a really cool book, right?
Yeah. Well, I was going to say, Brent, you may want to grab a drink and sit back. This is quite a list that Darin's given me. You may want to check back a little while. He's got a long list, an impressive list.
Good.
It is Dave
Well, I like hearing the stories usually about how they came up, right? I mean, the
you were
Greg
saying
Renoff
that,
is probably the
yes.
ultimate, right?
Yep.
But
That's
I like to
exactly
hear like how did it all come together? How did they meet? The Steven Tyler book is great for kind of talking how they
love that stuff.
got together, and then it's kind of answered in uh Joe Perry's version of the truth.
Oh, well, that's the funny too. You always get the different versions of
Yeah,
the
so
truth.
that's
Here's a cool Aerosmith piece of Aerosmith trivia. The first time they ever played Dream On live was in Connecticut, in Willimantic, Connecticut, at a place called the Shibu Inn. Did you know that?
I did not know that.
There you go.
Maybe I did at some point when I read the book, but I long
I
forgot.
don't think he mentions in the. I
Oh
haven't read
no?
any of the books, so maybe it's in there. I
Oh,
don't know,
maybe.
but yeah. Dave Mustaine's bio titled Mustaine from 2011. You noted awesome read and inspiring. Anthrax's Scott Ian, I'm the Man.
That one's good.
Great
That
read
one's
on.
good because you feel like it really gives you a snapshot. And if you're a Metallica fan, you need to read that book because there's a ton of like you can feel like you're the cold streets of New York as those guys were sleeping on cardboard beds. And he had to wake up early to wake up Hetfield to get to a Metallica. Like you can really feel the grit of the New York early 80s
80s.
metal
Yeah.
scene in that book.
Yeah.
It's a great book. And the Mustaine one is insane because Megadeth exists purely out of rage. And
Revenge for getting
yeah,
thrown out
he
of
was
Metallica.
just thrown out, given a one-way train ticket back to New York, and then still sniffing glue months later in his parents' bedroom, he, out of rage, bursts Megadeth and somehow manages to bring that band up to worldwide stardom. So it's an amazing lightning strikes twice type of book.
A cool moment though, if Metallica ever decides this is our farewell tour, have them come up on stage.
Mm,
That'd be cool.
yeah.
That'd be cool.
It's a good book though. It's a good book. And then he falls asleep on his arm and loses the complete use of his guitar playing hand.
That
And then
happened to Eddie Money too, and he got
yep.
messed up on drugs and he fell asleep
Same thing with Mustaine. Then he reaches out to a company that built this like bionic glove that he would wear that would stimulate the nerves over the course of like, and he basically retaught himself how to play guitar. Again, out of probably pure rage, right?
Amazing.
It's a good book, though. It's a good book.
And you're a big Aerosmith fan, as we just mentioned. Joe Perry's book rocks. Steven Tyler's book, Does the Noise in My Head Bother You? And you mentioned Joey Kramer's book, Hit Hard, A Story of Hitting Rock Bottom at the Top. Joe Satriani's book, Strange Beautiful Music, right? That's the one, I think.
Yep.
Zach Wilde's book. You got it signed. Is This Bringing Metal to the Children? That's the title of the book? Is that the one?
Yes, that's it. Okay. Yeah, he did a book tour stop in Toronto, I believe.
Okay. Now tell us about, there's a great story behind the Lou Gramm book. You got it signed. This is Lou Gramm's Jukebox Hero, My 5 Decades in Rock and Roll.
So it intersects with Brent here because so Lou Gramm's post-Foreigner band, just called the Lou Gramm Band, kind of Christian rock, but there's, if you didn't really pay attention to the lyrics, they kind of sound like Foreigner. They played at the festival that Brent put together and managed called the Sound of Music Festival, which is Canada's largest free festival. So Lou was playing there, and I picked up the book and I read it and I had him sign it because it's funny. Oddly enough, he also changed his appearance over the years because he was quite ill. So you maybe wouldn't have recognized the guy sitting there. But I went over to him and had a great conversation with him, and he signed it. It's a fantastic book because for those who don't know Foreigner's story, Lou Gramm awoke one day with an inoperable brain tumor the size of a grapefruit and was told he had 6 months to live.
6 months to live, early 2000s.
And after that, the band thanked him for that by kicking him out. Yeah. And he was kind of on his own to live through that ordeal. And then he kind of came back to the fold, Foreigner, right? So it's a pretty cool rise to the top, fall to the bottom, rise to the top again, right?
I saw him play solo, and it was maybe 3-4 years ago, and he had worked really hard to get his voice back.
Yeah. He couldn't even spell for a while, right? So he couldn't read, he couldn't spell, so he had a hard time really relearning his own vocals for a while there.
Criticism of people saying he was gaining weight.
Yeah, that was the prednisone from this massive operation he had, right?
And everybody's like, "Stop eating, man. Push the plate." And he's like, "Dude, you don't get it. It's not. It's part of my recovery."
Yeah, he was just trying to like focus on the next lyric on there, right?
Yeah, crazy. Stephen Pearcy's Sex, Drug, Rat and Roll. Sex, Drugs, Rat and Roll. He just recently talked about another one he wants to put out. He's gonna work on a second one. Stephen Pearcy.
That's it's a sleazy book. It's a fun read. It's kind of like if you like the Motley Crue stuff, it's kind of a sleazy tell-all, right?
Well, speaking of the Motley Crue book, The Dirt, you got on your list. The Black Strat, Pink Floyd, A History of David Gilmour's Black Fender Stratocaster. The Lightning Hopkins bio, His Life and Blues. The Delta Blues, The Life and Times of the Mississippi Masters Who Revolutionized American Music. Martin Scorsese presents The Blues, A Musical Journey. Highway 61. I found more than a few under that title. Which specific one? Is it?
This one's more of a book that if you ever wanted to take, I guess, the Mississippi Blues trip.
Is it a photo book?
Mostly? It's a photo book that stops at kind of the places where, the crossroads apparently, and, different gravestones of different, to this day, people aren't really sure where Robert Johnson's buried, right? So this book kind of touches upon that. If you're ever going to do the blues trail, they call it, it's kind of the map or the guidebook that you take along with you, right? It's a cool book.
Yeah. Blues, Booze, and Barbecue. Is that Billy Gibbons' book? No.
No, this one's kind of the same book as you just talked about, except for it's just a photo book taken in all these, Hammy Sanger guys might be in some of the photos. I got to check. It's about kind of the Southern barbecue, how important barbecue is to blues. And food and gathering. So it's just a bunch of photos of fairly obscure blues players playing at these juke joints and outdoor barbecues, and it's raining, and you just feel like you're in the South. Yeah. You want a quick trip to the South, pour yourself a drink and flip through that book, right? It's pretty cool.
You got one of my all-time favorites on the list, Phil Collins' Not Dead Yet. Love Phil Collins. Yeah.
That was a good book too, man.
Yeah.
No idea he was such a druggie or an alcoholic. I had no idea.
Well, he always seemed like upbeat, happy, the jokester, and you realize he's gone through some bouts of depression. Yeah. Hard to Handle by former Black Crowes drummer Steve Gorman. Have you heard the new Black Crowes songs?
I have.
Awesome. Fingers
They're good,
crossed.
but I miss him, man. I
Well,
miss him.
Yeah, right. I was going to say it's just the brothers. I think maybe the bassist from the original lineup is there. Maybe.
Well, one of them from, yeah. But he's like Steven Adler, where like he's got that kind of swing or messed up thing that just sounds like early Black Crowes, right? You can't kind of replace, right?
You have a book on your list. I'm so glad you mentioned this because this is one that I got years ago, and I got a ton of great information on ZZ Top from. The band's roadie, David Blaney, put out a book, Sharp Dressed Man, ZZ Top Behind the Scenes from Blues to Boogie to Beards. This is from way back in 1994. That's a great book.
It's an awesome book,
Oh,
and Disney does not want you to have it. So I guess Hyperion, it went out of, that's a subsidiary of the Disney books, and it only had a very short run, and ZZ Top tried to get it kind of squashed.
I was thinking, I was wondering how they responded to
if you find it, well, they don't really talk about it. They kind of don't acknowledge it.
Yeah, because
but if you read it, if you can find it, it's a good book. If you like ZZ Top, it kind of tells about how that band kind of came to be and kind of what it is behind the scenes, right?
But there's I think probably the biggest sore spot for the guys in the band was the Eliminator album and who gets songwriting credits, right? Because he was talking about, I can't remember the guy's name, but there was a guy that came in and really helped to form these songs and the sound of the Eliminator album. If I remember correctly, I think that was something.
Yeah, and they kind of introduced Billy to the Lynn drum machine.
Yeah.
And then when Dusty and Frank kind of came back in there to hear like an early mix, they were like that's not me, because it was obviously a machine, right?
Yeah.
And they all were very upset by that until they started cashing the checks from Eliminator.
Yeah. But then also I think there's a guy who didn't get credit for some of the songwriting.
The guy who kind of engineered it all. I can't remember his name, but it's in the book. And yeah, he kind of feels like the forgotten piece because he kind of introduced that kind of synthesizer drone effect that kind of holds the glue on all those Eliminator hits like Legs and stuff like that, right?
Slash's memoir titled Slash. Dave Grohl's first book, which I believe is The Storyteller, Tales of Life and Music. Is that the one you're talking about? Okay.
Yep. That one's good.
And you're about to start a book on Cheap Trick's early years. BJ Cramp's This Band Has No Name. He was on the podcast. A phenomenal book.
Yeah, that's what made me get it. That episode made me get it.
Okay.
I'm a huge I didn't know the book was out until I heard that episode, so thank you.
You started reading yet?
I have not. I'm going to start it now.
You're going to love it. I got it right here. Right behind me. Yeah. All right. Books Darin wants to read, but hasn't yet. You want to read one on CCR and you're looking for a recommendation. Well, you can't go wrong with Fortunate Son by Fogerty.
Okay.
You can't go wrong.
I'll pick that one up.
The man himself, John Fogerty. Yeah. Books you would like to see written. One on Kim Mitchell of Max Webster. That's a really cool.
I'm trying to get him to write it.
Are you?
I'm trying. It's not working.
Yeah.
His exact words to me is, I'm not one to dish dirt on people. So if I took that out, probably no one would want to buy it.
Kim Mitchell, if I'm not mistaken, Go for Soda.
Correct.
Right? I love that song.
Yep.
That was a song my local rec station used to play here. Why not go for
Here in Canada, he's, his original band, Max Webster, is quite revered as progressive art rock.
You want to follow up to Red by Sammy? I think we all do, man. There's a lot that's happened since
2011 to now.
Right? A follow up to David Lee Roth's Crazy from the Heat. Of course, yeah. A lot's been happening since. And of course, Mikey's bio. I've heard that said so many times. And he's thought about it, but he said, just like Max Webster, if I'm going to put a book out, it's not going to have dirt. But that's fine. Give us stories about the songs, how they were written,
or just set the record straight on how many songs you actually played on that people sometimes say that you didn't, right? Because I think you played
great fun stories
yeah.
from the road.
Oh, tons. Yeah.
Yeah. That'd be cool.
And now we can add DLR book. There we go.
Yes. Great book, Darin Paltrowitz, which you can buy at the Van Halen store. Wink, wink.
Nice.
And here's one. You'd like to see a book written about how the Van Halen news desk came to be.
Yeah.
Nudge, nudge, wink.
When's that coming out?
I told this to Jeff Hausman, right? We had a talk recently.
And
he didn't say no. I'm going to just say that, okay? It got his attention. I said, let's do it, man.
Yeah, you should.
Yeah, I mean, that would be interesting because I'd love to know the history of that because some people even forget that it's a fan site because it's really, it's like Darren Paltrow says, we're the de facto source for Van Halen news. It's like
Yeah.
it is quote unquote a fan site, but a lot of the
And you
sources
wouldn't know
have
that
them
by the
go
terms of
to.
I can't think of another fan driven site where it's kind of become the de facto go-to. I mean, you guys kept the lights on and the flag going in all the quiet years, which is a lot of years.
Yep.
Yeah.
So thanks.
But we every now and then, if the news desk hits like Rolling Stone or Ultimate Classic Rock, well, I'll text Jeff. Hey, we made it to blah, 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 and, he loves that. Yeah, I mean, that would be cool. That would be cool. So he didn't say no. I'm just going to say that. Finally, what does Darin look for when reading a book on rock? I'd love to hear how the band formed, the early days. Some dirt is fun, but overall, we want to hear about the climb to fame and fortune. And if it's lost, the climb to regain and overcome obstacles, like Lou Gramm and Mustaine's. Okay, Brent, are you still there? We're still with us? You there?
Yeah, I just woke up from my nap. So,
I told you
no,
could have gone to have a drink. You could have.
no. I'll tell you what. There's a few books that were
He's got a
cited
few
here
gray
that
hairs that just
I'm gonna go
developed.
get.
I love it. All right, so Brent's picks. You ready? Darin, are you aware of these at all? This is
Some of them I've perused. I've seen the shelves.
all right. James Maynard Keenan of Tool, a perfect
Yes.
union of contrary things.
Yeah. The interesting thing so I've seen Tool once live and not necessarily my style of music, but I was blown away in the live setting. And then Sammy actually interviewed him as part of his rock and roll road trip. And like Maynard's got he's got a winery and he's got a, pizza oven restaurant at his winery and all this stuff. And I was like, this guy's interesting. So I watched a few interviews on him and right away I was like, this dude is like very intellectual, a super interesting guy. And I also love the title of the book, A Perfect Union of Contrary Things. Like it's
Yeah.
probably one of the best book titles I've ever
Read the
I've
lyrics,
ever
man.
seen.
Read his lyrics, and you're like, "What?
Yeah,
This dude's deep." Perfect Circle
genius.
too. Yeah, Perfect
Yeah,
Circle.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
genius.
Did he do on stage? I don't know if he does this every tour, but it's like the light is shining down on him, and he's on this separate part of the stage, and it looks like he's not even human. Like he's doing all these weird
Yes.
proportions.
So the one show that I saw, that tour, they had him on a riser kind of behind and to the side of the drums with a single blue light on him, and
Yes.
he was wearing like a tactical police gear. And it was like he was moving almost like the Terminator. It was
Yes.
crazy,
Oh,
super
that's so
cool.
cool.
Yeah,
That's cool.
yeah.
Yeah.
Really, really good book. Like surprising the stories and his upbringing and some of his youth. Amazing,
I didn't
amazing
write
book.
down what year that came out, but not too long ago,
I
I
got
would
it right
think.
here.
Yeah, okay. What does it say inside
Um,
there? While you look that up, Kurt Cobain, Serving the Servant by Danny Goldberg.
2016
2016, okay.
for that one. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Serving the Servant was really interesting too. Nirvana, not a band that I was necessarily a big fan of in their heyday, but have come to appreciate in later years. And what I learned from reading this book by Danny Goldberg, this one here, Serving the Servant, is amazing. So Kurt Cobain, actually, I really got a sense of him as um, I think he was a very uh, kind, old soul sort of guy, and you would never think that, in terms of his persona, but he was a guy who I've have come to learn cared deeply about people and the way people were treated, and especially groups that might be considered in the minority because of race or religion or something like that. And he was like, I'm going to stand up for you when nobody else is going to stand up for you.
Wow.
And so I think he was much more of a I don't know if humanitarian is necessarily the right word, but he had a real compassion for people and sticking up for people that hadn't been treated very nicely. So it was kind of interesting to get that side of a guy that you'd look at him and go, not even in a million years would you think that, right?
Right. Yeah, and he was the conflicted part of him where he
So
did want to make it big, but at the same time, he gets thrown into
yeah.
this spotlight that I don't know if anybody's been in that position before or since. It was like,
No, I mean
I
he
mean,
was talking
Jesus
about.
Christ, it was like he was like some kind of god, and he was just like it was way too much for him to take.
Yeah, totally. He was, you're right. He was very conflicted, and there is some talk about that in the book where he's sort of like, we're supposed to be part of this underground movement and we're supporting the kind of alt community. And there was a magazine called Pop Smear that came out, and he was very loyal to this sort of underground publication and all of that. And so whenever he was asked to be interviewed in the mainstream press, it bothered him because he didn't want that attention. He didn't want the fame and fortune of being
Yeah,
a rock star.
like
Yeah.
he tried to put the horse back in the barn, I guess you could say, with
Yeah.
in utero. Like, let's make an album that's not going to be pop at all, and it still becomes huge. And I think at that point he's just like, oh fuck, man,
Yeah.
I can't even, I can't even shake the, like he said, he'd see all these high school football stars in the crowd. These are the dudes that beat the shit out of him when he was in high school. And
Yeah.
there's, now they're like, yeah, man, Kurt.
100%. Well, and you look too, I mean, the very short, like truly meteoric rise of that band and the short time frame that they were on top of the world, but they went from nobody to being one of the biggest bands in the world like that.
There's a story I tell, and I wrote about it on when I was working in radio. Wrote a blog about it in New Haven back in '91, in October of '91, I think. It's like a month before Smells Like Teen Spirit took off. They played at a tiny club there, which is not even there anymore. It was called the Moon, and there's like 100 people in there. They were completely unknown. Nobody knew who they were outside of the like that fringe audience, the people that talk to each other and say, "Hey, I heard about these dudes. They're good, man. You got to go check them out." It's like 100 people there. It's on YouTube. You
Hmm.
can see it, and it's
Hmm.
like within 6 months, he's playing. They were popular enough to be playing arenas.
Yeah.
Mind blowing. It's
Yeah.
just mind blowing.
Yeah.
But Dave Grohl he was able to be level headed, I think, and Chris Novoselic and Grohl. You have his book, The Storyteller, on your
Yes.
list. Yeah.
Storyteller is incredible, and not anything directly to do with the book and in a different media. But I really I've never claimed to be a Foo Fighters fan necessarily, but Dave Grohl I think is another example of an incredibly intelligent person, a smart businessman, a good human, I think. And his interesting story that kind of actually got me turned on to going seeking out the book was somebody told me, and here's one for your listeners. Go search if you haven't seen it on YouTube. Um, South by Southwest, about maybe 8 or so years ago. Dave Grohl was the keynote speaker at the South by Southwest
Wow.
event, keynote address. And so there's a video of it on YouTube. It's about 40 minutes long, I think, or something. And it is honestly probably one of the best speeches, presentations that I've ever seen.
Wow.
It talks about how he first learned how to record music. And I don't want to give it away because you got to watch it to see the whole thing. But he recounts in his speech on stage at South by Southwest when he first learned how to put music together and record himself. And his whole speech it's
It's
incredible.
on YouTube.
It's awesome. Yep. Yeah.
Yeah.
You just do Dave Grohl South by Southwest keynote and it'll pop up. It's amazing.
Tell me a
Yeah.
little bit about this Alice in Chains book on your list, The Untold Story by David DeSola. The interesting thing that I listened to an interview with David. I think it was him, and the Lane Staley, the singer, he he wasn't doing hard drugs for a long time. It wasn't until like '93 or something that he got turned on to it by somebody, which was kind of
Yeah.
surprising, I thought. He was a
Yeah.
drinker mostly.
Yeah, absolutely. You're right. And this book is interesting because it's kind of an account of someone who was, sort of a friend of the band members and was kind of on the inner circle a little bit. It's a really good story of their early beginnings and their rise. And they're another example of a band that I wasn't necessarily a fan of, even when I saw them open up for Van Halen on
Yeah,
the Front Awful Car Knowledge tour. I was sort of
91.
like, these guys suck, and why is this the opening band, and what is this? And then like 2 or 3 or 4 years later, and subsequently, I have really grown to appreciate their music. Of course, Jerry Cantrell and Sammy are friends, and he's been down to Cabo at the birthday bash and all that. Alice in Chains has blossomed into one of my favorite bands,
Hmm.
and this story was, I mean, there's some sad moments again because it's um, that rise to fame in the grunge era and not being able to handle it or maybe even want it. And Jerry Cantrell has said in interviews that Lane Staley is probably like the best uh, singer that he
Oh
has
my God,
ever
what a
known. And
voice.
like the guy's
Yeah, I mean
voice
him
is,
and Cornell, Chris
yeah,
Cornell. Yeah.
incredible. And, not necessarily the best technical singer, but his tone and the grittiness of his voice, it just like there's nobody that sings like Lane Staley. The guy's unbelievable. So this was a really good one because it talked about a lot of their early days and their evolution as young guys, and even the deaths that they went through with Mike Starr, the original bass player, having dying from a drug overdose,
Yeah.
and Lane Staley dying from a drug overdose. It just really kind of sad, right?
And they've done well with a new singer. He's not even new anymore. He's been there for a while.
Yeah, he's incredible too.
Um,
Yep.
what's his
Yeah,
name?
that's William Duvall.
Well,
Yeah,
yes, right.
yeah, he's amazing. And
Yeah.
he pulls off some of the old stuff live, like killer.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
And of course, you got Sammy's book Red on there.
yeah,
So books on rock that you haven't read yet, but you want to. Neil Peart, Ghost Rider. The Police Walking on the Moon by Chris Campion. I
yeah,
want to read this one too. Love
yeah,
the Police.
yeah.
Love the
Police,
Police. Yeah.
incredible. And Sting, I think, is a fascinating human
Yeah.
who again is like not unlike David Lee Roth. I think incredibly intelligent, very well read, and just a interesting guy.
And
Yeah,
yeah, this is the I think this is in the promo for the book. It says ambition brought the Police together. It also tore them apart, but not before they became the biggest band in the world and the first supergroup of the 1980s. There isn't one bad album. They're all great. Every
no,
single Police album. So
no, it's
if it's too bad they couldn't continue, which Andy Summers said him and Stuart Copeland wanted to. They didn't because Sting wanted to go solo. That's a bummer, but boy, they went out on top.
they sure
Synchronicity,
did. Yeah.
pretty good album, I would say.
Yeah, what a catalog. Absolutely.
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah. There's some crazy stories in there too about just them getting into fights. It was just the what was the one that Stuart Copeland, Sting and Andy could talk like they're a little more what's the word I'm looking for? Experienced like in music terminology, right?
Mm.
And Stuart Copeland wasn't, and so Sting and Andy would purposely talk and say things that would kind of
Just
exclude
mess with them a
Stewart,
bit, eh?
right?
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
it was just like they did things just to poke each other, and piss each other off. There's
Yeah.
that clip of them on MTV where it wasn't for fun. They were like they just started wrestling on the ground. It's like some outdoor festival.
It's
I
like the
mean,
stories we used to hear of Eddie and Al when they were kids. They just end up having fisticuffs,
yes,
right?
yeah. But
Totally.
I get the feeling now, all these years later, that they are all friends. I mean, they talk about that, but at the same time, they'll all tell you if we get back in the room together again, if it's me, if it's Sting, Stewart, and Andy back in the room together again, get ready because it's gonna all come back.
It's a fight.
Yes, yeah,
It's a fight. That's the Police are definitely a band that I would love to see reunite for like
yeah.
just do a one little tour, a series of shows.
Yeah, it's
Yeah,
interesting. Sting is going out on tour with a three-piece, him and two
he
other
is.
guys. So,
Yep. Yep.
what does that tell you, right? He's that's much like the Police. Books that you want to read or would like to see written it that haven't. So Ross follow up to Crazy from the Heat, of course.
Yeah.
Yeah, a book on the Cult. What a band.
Yeah, The Cult is another one of my favorite bands. Seen them live a handful of times, and I think Ian Astbury is another one of those guys that I put in the category of. I think he's extremely well read and a very, very intelligent person. And I mean, if you listen to a whole bunch of the Cult songs, like the album Ceremony is a great example. The lyrics on some of the tunes are just really, really smart and super deep. And I just feel like that would be a band, him and Billy Duffy, they've stuck it out together, the two of them. So many bass players, so many drummers have rotated in and out of that band, even back when they were called Southern Death Cult in their early years.
Yeah.
I just think fascinating guy. Just would love to hear some
And there's no books on them yet. I thought
nothing
really?
that
Wow.
I can find.
Nothing you can find? Yeah, he
Oh,
should
wow.
write a book too.
Yeah.
Yeah, that'd be a great read. And there's one, you said you want to read a book on Chris Cornell, and there's one I can recommend because I did interview the author. This is from 2020. Corbin Reef wrote a great book. It's called Total Fucking Godhead. That's the title. The biography of Chris Cornell.
Gee, I wonder what that's about.
Excellent book. Excellent.
Yeah, cool. Thank you for that.
Yeah.
It's awesome.
And when you're reading a book on rock, you're looking for life off the road in business and in dealing with fame. That's what you're looking for in a book. So, all right,
Yeah.
guys. So where can people find the podcast? Where can people reach you on social media? Let the world know.
Yeah, no, thank you for that. We're on primarily Instagram and on Facebook, just at the Bogus Otis Show. And you can get episodes of the podcast everywhere: Apple Music, Spotify, pretty much any platform that has a podcast. You can find us. Just get on the Google and search up the Bogus Otis Show.
Yeah, Darin. How about you on social media? Do you guys want to get your personal social media sites, or people can just reach you through the podcast?
Yeah, come find us on
Yeah.
the Bogus Otis feeds for sure. Both Darin and I on Facebook and Instagram are really active on there. We're always answering messages, responding to comments, and we just would
And we
love
should
to
probably encourage more people
chat.
we don't ever encourage people to send stuff, and they do, but we should probably encourage it more because we do monitor all the notes and answer, and we'd love to hear what other fans want to hear us go on about, right? Like topics or ideas. Like we have our own thing, but like a few times people be like, you guys should talk about this. We're like, that's a great idea.
Oh yeah.
In fact,
Hey,
you should
listen,
come on and talk about it with us.
just
Yeah.
the episode that we did, Eric, with you when we did the ranking of balance. We've had a ton of messages and comments from people
Cool.
that just loved kind of hearing our ranking and sharing, what they put as their top songs off of balance. So it just spurred some really, really fun
Yeah, it's great.
conversation.
There's no right or
Yeah.
wrong. It's just what you
No.
like.
Yeah,
I
it's great.
boy, I'm taking some heat. I was on in the podcast for Rock to talk about Van Halen 2, to rank the songs, And
I'm
I
going to
had-
listen to that. What
I had somebody get me a doctor, kind of low on the the list, and they're busting my stones on that one. They're just like, how could you possibly have that? I think I had it like 9 or 10 or something. There's no right
But
or
it-
wrong.
Yeah, but if it's Somebody Get Me a Doctor with Michael Anthony singing lead vocals, then it's
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 right at
ranked
the top.
higher, right?
Of course,
Yeah.
right at the top.
yeah.
Do you
There
guys
you
know
go.
any guests that you can tell us who's coming up? Anybody do you have in mind?
Specific guests, nothing yet, but we can tell you, Darin, we can talk a little bit about season 4,
We
I
got
think.
something kind of cool brewing
Yeah.
away today, right? In fact,
Yeah.
today was a big breakthrough about that. So
Okay.
Yeah.
go for it. You tell him, man.
So in the big picture, we just wrapped up season 3 of the show where we had Dino McCord as a guest. He's the lead singer of a band called Red Voodoo out of Sacramento, and Sammy's kind of been a bit of a mentor for these guys in this band, kind of helping them along and bringing them on. They've played at the Cantina. They've done a couple other little private gigs where Sammy's showed up and supported them. So we wrapped season 3 chatting with him. Good young guy who's trying to keep rock alive, just like Dirty Honey and some of those other bands out there.
Name
And
is
so
WVH.
and 100%, yes, thank
Wolfie.
you. And season 4 we're about to kick off, and what we're going to do is here in a few months, on the eve of the Best of All Worlds summer tour, we're going to theme all of season 4 around guests and topics and things that connect back to this summer tour.
Oh,
So
that's yeah.
we got a few
that's
cool
cool.
plans in the works. There's a few guests that we're chatting with that we haven't firmed up yet, but season 4 basically is going to be dedicated to the big theme of this summer tour with Sammy.
I'm so glad you mentioned that. I can't believe I didn't even ask this. Like, is there's one song that you hope to hear on this tour? Like one Van Halen song from Sammy's era that you'd love to hear them play live that he hasn't, whether it be on his own or even with Van Halen. I got
I'm going
mine.
back. I'm going back to our balance ranking. It's got to be for me. It's feeling
Right?
100%.
Feeling? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that would be a great pick. Darren?
Mine's maybe controversial coming from a co-bo host of a Sammy Hagar podcast, but this is I love a song where Sammy, if you want to go have a beer and relax and rest up for the second half of the show, I would love to hear Inside and have it just be a jam where they just
Wow.
jam out and have like
about
who
that?
knows jump comes up and they all just take some time to jam that tune out, right?
Cool.
Screw
That's
around.
a good pick. I have
Yeah.
two. I'm going to pick one hard rocker and one ballad, and I know the ballad will. I doubt it's going to get played, but feels so good.
Oh, killer.
That'd
Absolutely.
be awesome.
I would. I
Yeah.
don't think they ever played it live, and
No.
to this day I still remember my friends in high school saying, "No, they played it." I don't think they've ever played that live. And Judgment Day.
Great
Please.
Judgment Day would
choices.
be awesome, man.
Yeah, great choices.
I feel like that's the opener before the lights come on. It'd be Judgment Day
Yeah,
would be
yeah.
kick
Oh,
ass, right? And the lights
so
are still dark.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
would be cool. All right, guys. Thanks so much for being on, and I look
Whoa,
forward
Eric,
to.
I got a question for
Oh,
you though, man.
yeah.
We got to ask you something, man.
Oh, we're switching
Well,
roles.
I have a lot of the books I've been reading lately is because I've been following your show, listening to your podcast. So I love the show, man. So
Cool.
thank you. But of all the
Authors,
books that
thank you.
you've read, like what's your favorite? You have a list of a couple really top favorite books.
Oh, wow. Yeah, favorite. Just let me look over at. I'm running
Do
out of
they have to be
room,
Van
by the
Halen or
way.
not Van Halen? What do you think, Brent? Van Halen related or not Van Halen
No,
related?
it's wide open. Yeah,
All
yeah.
right.
Give us your fave.
Boy, oh boy, let me.
I mean, just one that you really loved.
Let me. Yeah, and this would be like ones that were featured on the show.
Or not, man. I'm
Or
just
not,
curious what
or
you
not.
read.
Because I love all 4 of the Kiss books. Each member that put out. Love that
Mm,
one.
mm.
Love that series, I should say. But I'm just thinking. I know there's one. I'm going to go with it. You know what? I'm going to go with an obscure one that I highly recommend everybody read. Okay, and this is like kind of out of left field, but so you know the song Chris Isaak's "Wicked Game," right?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to give you. I'm just going to throw this out there because it really, all of these books are just. I always find something in each and every one of these books, and these guys work so hard. And but there's a book called "Wicked Game: The True Story of Guitarist James Calvin Wilsey." Michael Goldberg wrote this book, and if you don't recognize the name James Calvin Wilsey, you have heard him. He does the guitar work on that song. He was Chris Isaak's guitarist, and he does that brilliant guitar work on Wicked Game. And he struggled with drugs, and his story is just fascinating because it's one of those what could have been. You know, all these musicians had such respect for him, but he ended up, one of the casualties of drugs, to the point where he was sleeping outside of a record producer building, like literally sleeping on like cardboard. And the owner of the place came out and was just like, I'm sorry, you got to leave. We can't have you sitting down here. And he says, oh, I'm sorry. He goes, you're so and so, right? He said her name. She says, yeah. He goes, I remember, I worked with you for a little bit. She's like, didn't recognize, I'm sorry, what's your name? James Calvin Wilsey. I was with Chris Isaak on Wicked Game. And the woman said was like, holy shit, sad, very sad. But Goldberg just goes into this guy's life from childhood right until the end. And it's just an amazing story. It's a sad story, but it's just one of those books that I'm kind of like, I always champion the underdogs. And this is a guy who could have been so much. He put out a couple solo albums. They're just phenomenal. Phenomenal.
I'm in. I'll read that. That sounds
Amazing.
cool.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Thanks,
So,
man.
but I mean, like I said, I mean, there's so many books now that I've read. That Cheap Trick one is definitely a must read. Definitely.
Yeah, I'm excited. It's pretty obscure though, right? Like, so it ends when the band kind of forms as we know it, right?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like really early days, right?
And let's hope Greg Renoff's book, it follows through and there's a movie on the book. You guys know about this.
Yes. Yeah, that's amazing.
I contacted Greg and asked if I could play the part of Marshall Burl. He said he'd think about it.
Yeah, what can I get a role? What do you think? Who should I play? Gotta be Noel Monk. No,
That's what I should ask for Noel. That's what I should have done.
I'll just be like one of the roadies or something.
Eddie Anderson. There you go. Play that role. That'd be fun.
Right. Testing, sibilance. Okay, guys, mic's working. That's it. All right, guys, thanks so much, man. I look forward to hearing the next episode. And hey, anytime you want me back on, we'll talk Sammy and Van Halen anytime.
100%.